Welcome back. We were discussing botanical nomenclature. In the last class, we had an introduction on different codes, ICBN and ICN. And the present code is Shenzhen code. And the previous code is Melbourne code. And the Melbourne code, which was published in 2012, which is the result of 18th IBC held at Melbourne in Australia in the year 2011, is very historic, and many changes were made during this Congress, and these changes were incorporated in the code known as Melbourne Code. And one of the most important change was the change in its title itself. Earlier, the title was ICBN. In Melbourne Code, the title changed to ICN, that is International Code of Nomenclature for Algae, Fungi and Plants. And many other changes were also made in this code. The nomenclature section of IBC, 18th IBC was met for 5 days starting from 18th to 22nd July 2011 at Melbourne, Australia. One of the major change or key decisions taken during this conference, IBC, was electronic publication of new names were permitted. Permission of electronic publication of new names from 1st January 2012. Earlier, a name should be published in a book or in a journal in a print form. In 2012, January 1st onwards, it is permitted to publish a new name of any rank, a new name of a taxa of any rank in the form of electronic publication, online publication. So online publication of new names were permitted according to this Melbourne Code. It is no longer required for new names of plants, fungi and algae, and type designations also. Designation of types will be discussed later, to be issued in printed matter in order to be effectively published. So effective publication and valid publication are two major conditions in the publication of new names. There are many rules regarding effective and valid publication of names. So effective publication means the medium by which a new name is published, in which journal or in which book, or whether it is published online. So online publication is permitted after this code, Melbourne Code. Before, it was mandatory to publish a name in the form of printed matter. Effective publication being a fundamental requirement. So effective publication is a fundamental requirement of the code. As an alternative, publication online publication in PDF format, that is portable document format, in a publication with International Standard Serial Number or ISSN number, or International Serial Book Number, ISBN number. So in a journal having ISSN number or in a book having ISBN number is permitted, or online journal with the ISSN number or online book with the ISBN number is permitted. So it is not mandatory to print, to publish the name in printed format. So that is one major decision. That is permission for electronic publication of new names. Earlier, new names were published in taxonomic journals like Redia, Novon, Annals of Missouri Botanic Garden, Condolia, Wildenovia, Blumia, etc. in printed form. Now it is possible to publish names online without print format, in PDF format. So this is a recent publication of a new name, that is Ceropegia, the Ceropegia nambiana. This name is published online. It was published in 2016, and it is possible. It was possible to publish because only of the new rule in the Melbourne court. This is another recently published name, published in 2018, Sonarilla lateritica. It is published in an online journal, Phytotaxa. So that is one change in Melbourne Court. And another one major change is the requirement of Latin diagnosis. Latin diagnosis means the diagnosis or the statement of the diagnostic characters. What are the distinguishing characters of the new taxon for which a new name is published? That is Latin diagnosis. So every publication of a new taxon should be accompanied by a Latin diagnosis. So Latin diagnosis is the statement of the diagnostic characters in Latin language. So from 2012 January 1st onwards, the Latin diagnosis is not required. Diagnosis is required, but it should not be in Latin language. It can be also in English. So you can replace Latin diagnosis with the English diagnosis. So Latin diagnosis is not necessary for the publication of new names from 1st January 2012. Since 1935, it has been required for names of new plants and algae to be published with a Latin description or diagnosis. So that is Latin diagnosis. And for names of fungi, the same rule has applied since 1958. That was a starting point or year of that rule. Whereas names of fossils can have either a Latin or English description or diagnosis since 1966. These rules have now changed, now means in 2012, so that all names governed by the code ICBN or ICN require either a Latin or an English description or diagnosis on or after 1st January 2012. So Latin diagnosis is not a must for publication, not mandatory for publication of new names. We can have either Latin diagnosis or English diagnosis. So that was the second major change in or key decisions taken in the Melbourne court. So this is an example for Latin diagnosis. This is a new name published in 2012. That is after the Melbourne court became effective. So this is the Latin diagnosis, that is statement of the diagnostic characters in Latin. And this is the Latin diagnosis of a new taxon, Coelacni madaiensis, a new grass species described from Madaipara. The diagnosis is Coelacni minota similis in habitu generali magnitudinecu spicularum structura sed habitu non cispitosa foliorum laminis avatis sine ligula ultimis lamina carentibus racimis persif spiculatis glumis palescu avenis staminibus 3 default. So that is the statement. And this species, no taxon, Coelacni madaiensis, is compared with another species of Coelacni, that is Coelacni minuta. So this is very much similar to Coelacni minuta, but it's different in many characters, and those characters are the similar characters are stated, and then What are the difference? They are also stated default. So we can understand how the new taxon is different, or how the new taxon can be distinguished from the closely related taxon, that is Coelacni minuta. That statement in Latin language is known as Latin diagnosis. So this in this publication the diagnosis is given in Latin itself, but it is not a mandatory. You can have English diagnosis also. So in this publication, this Latin diagnosis was provided by the third co-author, J.F. Worldcamp, is no more now. He was an expert in Latin, and he is a very prominent, very famous plant taxonomist from Netherlands, and he was also a scholar in Latin. And the problem with the Latin diagnosis is that the Latin language is not used anywhere in the world now. So it is difficult for the taxonomists to prepare Latin diagnosis. That's why the rule changed so that English diagnosis can also be incorporated. And this is another publication published in this recently, that is after adoption of the Melbourne Code. Here the diagnosis is not in Latin, but is in English. This is the diagnosis. We can easily understand this diagnosis. This states closely allied to Parasopubia delphinifolia. So this is the publication of a species, Parasopubia hoffmanni, and a variety, that is Parasopubia albiflora. So the new taxon, that is the new species, is compared with the Parasopubia delphinifolia, which is a closely related species to the new taxon. So closely allied to Parasopubia delphinifolia, but can easily be distinguished by its less or non-segmented leaves, calyx with a 2 mm long tube and up to 4 mm long divergent lobes, shorter campanulate corolla tube, and the capsules being obovoid and much exceeding the calyx tube. So this new taxon is closely related to Parasopubia delphinifolia in many characters, but that can be distinguished from delphinifolia by these stated characters. So that is the purpose of diagnosis. So the diagnosis can be either in English or in Latin. So that is the change or key decision. Then another major change is one fossil, one name. Earlier it was possible to name or to give many names to a fossil, to a single fossil taxon. For example, I have studied Lepidodendron. Actually, the Lepidodendron is a stem structure. Its leaves were known as Lepidophyllum, fruit or the megasporangium as Lepidocarpon, its root system Stigmaria, like that. So there is a reconstructed plant, that is Lepidodendrons. So when we get fossil specimens, we will give independent name for different segments. When we get a leaf, we will give a name. When we will get fruit, we will give a different name. Later, the different segments of the taxon will be reconstructed to a single taxon. We will then also we will retain different names. So these different names, or these different parts with the different names, were known as morphotaxa or morphogenus, morphospecies, etc. So we will have stem morphospecies or stem morphogenus, stem morphotaxon, leaf morphotaxon, etc. So that this practice is abandoned in this Melbourne Congress. So now it is not possible to name different segments with the different names. So when we identify a morphotaxon as a part of a different morphotaxon, then one of these names should be given, should be assigned for that taxon. So which is the earliest name? Which name, if the first name is given to the stem and later to leaf, then the correct name of the plant or the fossil should be the name of the taxon, name of the stem. For example, Lepidodendron. If Lepidodendron is the first described morphotaxon, then Lepidophyllum will be the leaf of Lepidocarpon. So we will adopt Lepidocarpon as the correct name of Lepidophyllum, and Lepidophyllum will be having a status of synonym. That will be changed to synonym status. The correct name will be Lepidodendron, like that. So it is not possible to give morphotaxon or morphotaxon names to different segments of fossils. So the code also had earlier special rules for names of fossils, whereby separate names could be applied to morphotaxa. The nomenclatural section decided to abandon the whole concept of morphotaxa, so that when two or more morphotaxa can be shown to belong to the same organism, when two or more morphotaxa can be shown to belong to the same organism, their names compete for priority in the usual way, and there is a rule of priority that will be discussed later. So if a taxon has more 2 or 3 morphotaxa, then the correct name of the fossil will be the earliest name, legitimate name, correct name published for any of these morphotaxa. That is the new rule. And the same applied for fungi also. And for over 30 years, the code has permitted separate names of the asexual and sexual forms. Deuteromycetes, Ascomycetes, Basidiomycetes, and Deuteromycetes. Deuteromycetes are asexual form. Actually, these Deuteromycetes have their sexual stage either in Ascomycetes or Basidiomycetes. So the sexual stage is different from sexual stage. That's why they were given different names, or they were included in Deuteromycetes. This was an exemption to one of the basic principles of the code. And this anomalous rule, Article 59, has now been deleted from the code. So one fungus will be having only one name. So Deuteromycete, whenever a Deuteromycete is identified as an asexual stage of either Ascomycete or Basidiomycete, then that morphotaxon name is eliminated. So that name may not have any formal value in the nomenclature. So that is one change. Then another one rule regarding fungal names is registration of fungal names via Mycobank is now required. So it is necessary to register names published for fungi in Mycobank. At present, Mycobank number is required for valid publication. This rule applies only to fungi. Then one major change that was discussed earlier, that is the new title for the code. Finally, the code is no longer the International Code of Botanical Nomenclature, that is ICBN. The approved present title is the International Code of Nomenclature for Algae, Fungi and Plants. So the botanical is deleted as many groups treated as plants are not true plants. The fungi is not a plant, belong to different kingdom, but the nomenclature is governed by ICBN. It was governed by ICBN, and many groups of algae are not true plant. So the title changed to ICN from ICBN. So these are the major key decisions taken in Melbourne Congress. Then the present code is Shenzhen Code, effective from 1st January 2018, and the Botanical Congress was held at Shenzhen, China, on the occasion of the 150th anniversary of the first rules for naming, that is botanical nomenclature, written by Alphonse Decanter. It was in 1867. In 2017, the history of botanical nomenclature, or the history of ICBN, or the history of codes completed 150 years. The meeting agreed to set up registers of new names of plants and algae so that when a new species is discovered, its name can be registered and details about it, such as original specimens collected when it was discovered, can be searched for in an open access online database. Many databases are available now. IPNA is a good database regarding nomenclature. So all names will be registered or included in an online database, so that we are able to it was possible to search the names and the related details such as type, etc., type, locality, etc., in an easy way. The rules for naming algae, fungi and plants now include a special chapter on how the rules themselves can be changed. Provisions for modification. And the most important change in Shenzhen Code is that the nomenclature section in Shenzhen wanted to put all the rules that apply only to the naming of fungi into a special chapter of the code. Special provisions for nomenclature of fungal species were put into a separate chapter, and that chapter will in future be changed and improved by a special nomenclature section at International Mycological Congress, not in IBC. So further changes in that chapter will be done in International Mycological Congress. And next Congress, International Mycological Congress, after Shenzhen Code was in 2018 in Puerto Rico, and this International Mycological Congress happens in every 4 years, but the International Botanical Congress happens in every 6 years. So this is the structure. We are coming to the structure of the ICBN or ICN, and this is the basic structure of International Code of Botanical Nomenclature. There is a preamble, and then that is followed by 3 divisions, and finally 7 appendices. So preamble followed by division 1, and the division 1 consists of 6 principles, a set of 6 principles, principle 1 to 6. Then division 2, various rules and recommendations which are set out in the 62 articles, article 1 to 62. Then division 3, provisions for modification of the code, how the rules and recommendations of the code can be modified in further conferences. Then that is followed by a set of 7 appendices. So this is the basic structure, different parts of code: preamble, 3 divisions, and appendices. And the appendices, these are the appendices. Appendix 1, names of hybrids. Appendix 2a, nomina familiarum, algarum, fungarum, et pteridophytarum, conservanda, et regiscienda. Conserved or rejected names of families of algae, fungi, pteridophytae, etc. Appendix 2b, nomina familiarum, bryophytarum, et spermatophytarum, conservanda. Conserved family names of bryophytes and spermatophytes. Then Appendix 3, nomina generica, conservanda, et regiscienda. Conserved and rejected names of genera. Nomina specifica, conservanda, et regiscienda. That is Appendix 4. Conserved and rejected species names. The nomina uticae regiscienda. There is some names rejected in favor of some other names. Then the next appendix that deals with the publications, the suppression of some publications. Opera utica oppressa. And the last appendix is Appendix 7, glossary of terms used and defined in this code. So these are the different appendices. The principles. So the code has the principles, articles, rules, recommendations, examples, etc. So the principles form the basis of the system of botanical nomenclature. So all the other rules and articles are based on these principles, set of 6 principles. The detailed provisions are divided into rules set out in articles and recommendations, and then examples are added to illustrate them. The objective of rule is to put the nomenclature of the past into order and to provide guidelines for the future. Names contrary to rules cannot be maintained, so that rules are mandatory to follow. So any name which are contrary to any rule should be avoided. Then recommendations. Recommendations are not mandatory. They deal with the subsidiary points. Their objective is to bring about greater uniformity and clarity, especially in future nomenclature. Names contrary to recommendations cannot on that account be rejected, but they are not the examples to be followed. So recommendations are not mandatory, but they are not the good examples to be followed. So they are guidelines for improvement of nomenclature procedure. The rules are mandatory and written out as articles. Notes are binding and clarifying of these rules. The recommendations are not binding, but they are suggestions for the improvement of nomenclature, and examples are explanatory. So these are the components of these rules and recommendations. So the code has a set of principles, 6 principles. The first one is botanical nomenclature is independent of zoological and bacteriological nomenclature. So there is no relation between botanical and zoological nomenclature, but these two are independent. The code applies equally to names of taxonomic groups treated as plants, whether or not these groups were originally so treated. So the code applies to the groups, taxonomic groups, which are treated as plants, whether or not these groups were originally so treated. For example, fungi. Fungi, for the purpose of nomenclature, fungi are treated as plants, but truly they are not plants. Okay, so botanical nomenclature or this nomenclature code applies to plants only, and there is no relation with the zoological nomenclature. It is independent of zoological. This can be explained with this example. And these are two taxonomic groups. One is a plant and other is a bird and animal. But both these organisms have the same scientific name, Acrocephalus. The plant is an Acrocephalus and the bird also is the name is, the genus is Acrocephalus. So we can use the same name used in botanical nomenclature, and the same name can be used in zoological nomenclature because these two are independent. So that is the first principle. Then the second principle is the application of names of taxonomic group is determined by means of nomenclatural types. Types are there. Usually these types are some herbarium specimens. So types are mandatory for the application of botanical names. The application of names of taxonomic group is determined by means of nomenclatural types. So that is principle 2. Then principle 3, the nomenclature of a taxonomic group is based upon priority of publication. Priority of publication. There is a rule of priority. That means which name is published earlier, first time, get validity. The name published for the same taxon will be having synonymous status only. That should be rejected. So which name is published early for a particular taxon, that gets validity. That is known as priority of publication. The nomenclature of a taxonomic group is based upon priority of publication. Then principle 4, each taxonomic group with a particular circumscription, position and rank can bear only one correct name, the earliest that is in accordance with the rules except in specified cases. So for a particular taxon of a particular rank, species, genus, family, order or any rank, that should have only a single name for that taxon, a valid name, except in specified cases. And this exception is given for some taxon. For example, some families, there are 9 families, angiosperm families are exempted from this principle, from this rule. These families are having 2 names. For example, Leguminosae. Leguminosae was the old name, and the new name is Fabaceae, but the old name is not rejected. That can be used alternatively. So that the Fabaceae is Leguminosae is the alternate name of Fabaceae. Poaceae, Graminae is the alternate name of Poaceae, like that. So except these specified cases, a taxonomic group should have a single name, which is earliest published name. Then principle 5, scientific names of taxonomic groups are treated as Latin regardless of their derivation. So Latin is the language of botanical nomenclature, zoological nomenclature also. We can take botanical names from any language, from Malayalam, for English, from Hindi, from any language we can adopt names, but this name should be Latinized, or this name should be treated as Latin regardless of their derivation. For example, Kayananthus, Malayalanyi. Malayalanyi is the Malayalam name, and that is Latinized to form the binomial of that species. That is Kayananthus Malayalanyi, Shivarajani, Shivadasani. Many names are given in honor of different scientists, taxonomies or places, etc. So, but though these words, these specific epithets derived from Malayalam, they are treated as Latin. They are Latinized first. So that is principle 5. Scientific names of taxonomic groups are treated as Latin regardless of their derivation. Then principle 6. The rules of nomenclature are retroactive unless expressly limited. Retroactive means if the rule, if we set out a new rule, there are two provisions. In the first provision, we can state from which date onwards the new name is valid. If that date is not stated, then the rule is retroactive. That means that is having previous validity. If a rule is set out in this year 2020, if it is stated as effective from 2020, then will be effective from 2020 only. If it is not stated, then the rule will be effective from a past history or from the starting point of botanical nomenclature, or 1867 we can say, or 1753, that is the starting point of binomial nomenclature. Okay, that is retroactive. The rules of nomenclature are retroactive unless they are expressly limited. So these are the 6 principles, principle 1 to 6. Botanical nomenclature is independent of zoological and bacteriological nomenclature. The application of names of taxonomic group is determined by means of nomenclature types. The nomenclature of a taxonomic group is based upon priority of publication. Each taxonomic group with a particular circumscription, position and rank can bear only one correct name. The earliest that is in accordance with the rules except in specified cases. Scientific names of taxonomic groups are treated as Latin regardless of their derivation. The rules of nomenclature are retroactive unless expressly limited. Now we will discuss individual rules and recommendations in further classes. Thank you.